We're going to use the foam roller next to do some myofascial release of our groins. So we're in this position, and we're going to start just on the outer third of the thigh. Then you'll move to the middle third and kind of trying to rotate here a little bit to get different portions of the muscle. And then you'll come in and get the inner third. And you don't have to go too fast. Just nice steady tempo. This is how you use the foam roller to do some myofascial release on your hip flexors. So first, find your hip flexor bundle, and a good way to do that is just by lifting up your leg. So then and putting your hand in the crease of your hip, you can feel it sort of flex and pop out. That's what you're going for. Then you're staying below your hip bone, and you're just rolling forward and back. And again, rotate your hips a bit. Get different aspects of the front of your hip. This is how you use the foam roll for some myofascial release on your lats. So we're looking at the posterior part of the shoulder below the arm, so we're not getting up onto our arm at all. We're really just going from the back side of your armpit down. So straighten that arm and then roll from the shoulder joint down. And again, I'll change my angle to target different areas. Don't really want to get up on my shoulder blade. This is supine hip internal rotation with your feet slightly wider than hip width, keeping your feet flat on the floor. You'll pinch your knees in together. When that's easy, you'll move them a little further out. Pinch them in again. You can change the angle of your knees, so straighten your legs out a little bit more or bend them in a little bit more just to get a slightly different stretch on the muscles. You should not feel any pinching sensation inside your hip when you do that. You should just feel like a gentle stretch. You're not trying to force that movement. Again, you're just going to the point of a gentle stretch. This is the elevated hip flexor stretch. I've actually set myself up on a bit of an angle to the step. Then I'm coming across, and now I'm bringing my hips and my shoulders so that they're square to the step, and I feel a stretch in the leg that's down. I'll show you from this side. So I'm coming in from an angle at the step, put my foot straight on the step, bring my hips and shoulders around to be square, and I'm feeling a stretch either here or into your thigh. Staying nice and tall in your torso. If you want more stretch, squeeze your glutes together as opposed to leaning back and extending your back. When you do the half kneeling groin, one knee is down, this knee is straight, and that's really important. Don't let it bend. And then you're just sitting back in your hips until you feel a stretch here, and you'll also feel a stretch here, slightly different stretch on each side. And then you can also change and do some diagonal reaches from that position to work in movement of the abdominals. Thoracic spine or T-spine mobility is really important. It's actually a part of the spine that's meant to be more mobile than your lower back. So when I say T-spine, I'm thinking about your mid-back from about here up to just the tops of your shoulder blades. It actually is intended to have mobility. Your lumbar spine is actually intended to be a little bit more stable. These sometimes get flip-flop because we sit a lot. We sit with poor posture. That thoracic spine gets stiff. So the mobility has to come from somewhere, maybe from the neck or often more from the lumbar spine, which can lead to back pain. So we're going to do a really nice simple exercise here. hands and knees, thoracic spine rotation. So I'm in a quadruped position, hands and knees. I'm keeping my back in a nice neutral position, so a slight little arch in my low back. I bring this hand to the side of my ear. And I'm going to point that elbow across and then open up and lift that elbow toward the ceiling. And I'm following my elbow with my head as I go. And I'm just going as far as I can. I don't want to rotate through my lumbar spine. So let me show you a different angle. Neutral spine. My chin is in a good neutral position. Sometimes people tuck their head under when they do this. I point across my body. I open up. Moving my head with my elbow. Keeping my chin in a neutral position. I call this static stretch. I call this static stretch the Spider-Man. So I'm trying to extend my back knee. I'm putting my hands down on the inside of this foot. My arm actually kind of keeps my knee out there, so it opens up my hips a little bit. What I think about is making myself as long as I can from my heel through my hip and right out the top of my head. When you do the pretzel stretch, you're going to start with just a typical glute stretch pattern, but then you're going to reach up with this hand and grab this foot, and you're going to reach underneath with your other hand and grab your other foot. And then I'm using the hip flexors on this side to actually pull this knee up, which is going to give me more stretch on my left glute. So I'm using the muscles in the front of this hip to help me stretch the muscles in the back of the opposite hip. The prone plank is a great exercise that pretty much everyone is familiar with, but some people do a really poor job of executing it properly. It's kind of like the stairway to heaven of exercises. Everybody knows how to play the first few bars, but very few people can play it really, really well. So from your elbows, again, making a straight line. So this is not right. This is not right. It's got to be a straight line. You're actively contracting your quadriceps, squeezing your glutes, bracing with your abdominals, locking in your shoulders. It's an active exercise. It's a great exercise. It's worth doing properly. For level 1 prone glute activation, you're going to put your fist under your forehead. Your toes are on the floor. You're going to actually feel your glutes, so the middle of your rear end, your butt cheek. And then you're just going to lift your knee off the floor. But while you do that, you're going to squeeze your glutes so that you get the idea of turning on your glutes when you do hip extension. So you need to actually feel them tighten. Lots of you can probably extend your knee without using your glutes at all. So just, using quadriceps or even using hamstrings, not using any glutes. So let's just make that connection, squeezing your glutes as you extend your hip. Side plank is another great exercise. It gets done improperly a lot, and a lot of times it's just because people don't quite have the strength to do it from their feet yet. So let's take it back, bring it to your knees. When you do from your knees, the starting position will be with your hips sitting back slightly, and then when you come up into the plank, you'll bring them forward to make that nice straight line. We don't want you just dropping down because it's a lot of lateral flexion in the spine. So you'll hold here, and then when it's time, you'll sit back in your hips like that. So make sure you're nice and straight. I think the common compensation pattern I see is usually people bringing their shoulders forward. So just keep this shoulder back. Make sure you're in a nice straight line, not piked at the hips when you're up in that side plank position. When you do the standing hamstring stretch, again, I'm going to toe this foot in a little bit and then bring this leg straight up and keep my hips and shoulders square to the step. So this leg is in a little bit of internal rotation at the hip. And then people always want to reach their toes, but you can see how much I'm rounding my back to get to my toes. I want you to keep your back in a good neutral position and just pivot forward at the hip. So I think of just curling forward, sticking my butt out behind me until I feel a nice stretch in the back of my thigh. I shouldn't be rounding my back at all. So I'll show you on the other side. I'm in a little bit of internal rotation, bringing my foot up on the step, getting my hips and shoulders square, and then coming forward. A lot of you will want to turn this foot out, which opens up the hips and then takes some of the stretch off the hamstrings. So we're gonna turn that foot in, stay nice and square.